The WNBA All-Star Weekend was already going to be a major event, the league celebrating its 30th season. Cameras everywhere, two of the biggest names in the sport sharing the same roster. But one decision has the potential to make the entire weekend more complicated than anyone expected, and it centers around a single question. Who gets to be captain? That conversation has suddenly become much bigger than a normal all-star discussion, because many fans are now asking the same question. If Caitlin Clark were chosen for that role, what would it say about where the league is heading? Not because of seniority, not because of championship rings, not because of years of league leadership, but because of impact. And that distinction is exactly what makes this situation so delicate, because in a league that has always prided itself on shared recognition, picking one player over another for a visible leadership role immediately turns into a bigger conversation, especially when that player is a young star still early in her WNBA career, and especially when the player being passed over is one of the most decorated veterans in league history. That is where A'ja Wilson enters the story. Wilson has championships. Wilson has most valuable player trophies. Wilson has years of credibility inside this league, and when a player with that kind of resume sees captain consideration go in a different direction, it is not hard to understand why that feels complicated. That is not jealousy by definition. That is not necessarily resentment, but it is tension, real tension, because the choice reflects a shift in what the league is now rewarding. For years, all-star leadership nods often went to established stars who had already earned that recognition through years of performance. Now, the conversation seems to be leaning toward a player whose impact shows up most clearly in a different way. Ratings, ticket demand, national attention, merchandise movement, cultural visibility. Caitlin Clark has changed the scale of attention around the WNBA. That is not a knock on Wilson. That is not a knock on any veteran. It is simply the reality of where the league's biggest growth is coming from. And when a coach has to build an exhibition weekend around viewership, marketability, and spectacle, the math starts pointing in a very clear direction. That is why this reported captaincy conversation feels so uncomfortable. It is not only about who deserves the title, it is about what the league now values most. And those two answers do not always match. That is the friction. Wilson has earned everything she has through years of dominance. Clark has accelerated the league's business and attention level in a way that almost no player ever has. Both things can be true at the same time. But when the league has to choose one for a visible role, the other side is naturally going to feel that choice. That is what makes this weekend different from a normal all-star showcase. The on-court product is supposed to be the story. Instead, the locker room dynamic, the captain question, and the broader conversation about Clark's place in the league is threatening to overshadow everything else, and that is not great for the WNBA, because this was supposed to be a celebration, a 30th season milestone, a showcase of how far the league has come, a moment to highlight the best players in the sport. Instead, the storyline entering the weekend is starting to feel more like an ongoing tension finally being forced into the same room. And that tension is not new. Wilson has spoken before about how the attention around Clark felt like it sometimes erased the league's history. That comment was fair to raise once. Wilson has the resume to speak on league history, but the conversation keeps coming back. Almost every major Clark moment seems to trigger another round of commentary about fairness, attention, and recognition, and that pattern is part of what makes this captain discussion feel heavier than it should, because when the same topic keeps coming up across interviews and media discussions, people naturally start reading into it, whether that is fair or not. At some point, the repetition starts telling its own story, whether that is the intention or not. Meanwhile, Clark keeps doing what she has been doing all season. She is not publicly pushing back. She is not responding to every comment. She is not using interviews to defend her place in the conversation. She is producing historic numbers, record performances, efficient nights under restricted minutes, production that speaks for itself. That approach tends to age well. Not engaging with every headline usually outlasts the noise that surrounds it. And that is why if Caitlin Clark were ultimately given that role, it would make sense from a certain angle. It is not about disrespecting Wilson, it is about acknowledging who is currently driving the most visible attention around the league. Coaches understand that math better than anyone. An all-star game is still an exhibition. Its entire purpose is to put on the most compelling showcase possible. And right now, the player most capable of elevating that showcase is Caitlin Clark. That does not make Wilson's resume smaller. It just makes the choice clearer because the league is no longer operating in the same environment it was 5 years ago. The audience is bigger, the spotlight is brighter, the stakes are higher, and the people investing in the league expect the product to reflect what is actually driving the numbers. That is the uncomfortable part for veterans, not because they have not earned respect, but because the league's growth has outpaced the old way of distributing recognition. And when that happens, decisions like this become inevitable. The 30th season was supposed to be a celebration of everyone who built this league. Instead, it might end up being the moment where the league's new direction became impossible to ignore. That is not a bad thing. Growth always comes with friction, but it is a real thing. And how the WNBA handles this weekend, this captain decision, and the broader tension between seniority and impact will say a lot about where the league is heading next, because the old model was built on shared recognition. The new model is being driven by individual impact. And somewhere between those two things, the WNBA has to find a way to honor its past while fully embracing its future. That is the real story of this All-Star weekend, not the game itself, not the rosters, not even the captain decision. The real story is what that decision reveals about a league in transition.